Second Cup is brought to you by Roswell Park Comprehensive Care Center.
Hey everyone, what's up? It is 8 o'clock on the start of your Tuesday. Here we are. Welcome to Second Cup. Back upstairs and in the room we affectionately call Epcot.
Epcot, the room where it happens.
Yeah, it's a small world, isn't it? I hope you're off to a great start on this Tuesday. Dear, is it cold outside or what?
That we knew, right? We listen to Weather Daddy. He tells us what we need to know. Yesterday, we were preparing for that frost. Overnight frost advisory was in effect until 8, so it just ended. But what's going on with that? Frost in May.
I was just outside for a little while. It wasn't as cold as it was overnight. When I came into work this morning, I can tell you I put the seat heater on and it felt great. It was chilly.
Sometimes that early morning chill is nice and you enjoy it as you start the day, but today was a little bit too much for me. It just a little too cold.
Did not love it. Jeanette says Ed's tie looks perfect for the Epcot studio today.
Yes, you're
Thank you
matching.
very much. I haven't worn this tie in a long time.
I don't think I've seen it.
It's an older one, an oldie but a goodie. Speaking of being cold outside, how about the people who are outside striking this morning outside? Many of the
2
nursing
hours
homes,
now.
right? Exactly. All across Western New York. This is the Northgate facility in North Tonawanda. Our photographer, DL Webster, is there live for us this morning. So many of these union workers in 1199 SEIU, the union representing these workers, are on strike this morning because they want better working conditions, they want better pay, and they want better staffing levels.
Better benefits. I mean, when we're hearing from them, they're saying that it's really almost impossible for them to do their jobs efficiently and do them well, and it is impacting the care that they can give to patients because there simply aren't enough people, and they say that they're not being treated fairly.
Okay, so I want to go to the comments here because I think some of them are interesting already. Felice, good morning to you. The problem is out-of-state nursing home owners. So these are people who have just simply had enough. We heard from one woman this morning who said that she is, a 40-year veteran of this facility, and she is barely making $20 an hour.
I mean, that's the reality for so many of them. So I can only imagine if she's a 40-year veteran, what are people who are underneath her making and what's their experience? So you have people who are really just kind of fed up at their wits' end. But it's been interesting to watch this morning the energy that's out there as they are on the side of the road here in North Tonawanda at Northgate. Cars are driving by, they're honking, they've got signs, they've got flags, they're playing music, they've got big speakers. People are full of energy at this strike, and I mean, they're just a couple of thousands of people who are going to be out there.
Felice, good morning once again. I was a licensed nursing home administrator, and I started washing dishes at that home when I was 16. Staffing was not a problem at all back then. She also goes on to say that in the 90s, that's when staffing shortages became a problem, saying that she's so happy she retired, quote unquote. She was burnt out at age 47. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I was drawing parallels and comparisons to the daycare industry, right? It's the beginning and end of life. And here we are. The people who are in these positions are barely making minimum wage. We're expecting them to take really good care of our children, our elderly, and people who are just, in rehab trying to recover from whatever it is that they're going through. In terms of surgery or whatever, but they're short-staffed. They're not making a lot of money. It's a lot of money to send these people there, and it's just this vicious cycle that continues to perpetuate itself.
So how do you convince people to join this field and get a new workforce in to help solve them these problems if this is what they're in for, right? If they're in for a career where they have to work very hard and may not feel like they're making enough doing that job, I don't know how we bolster that workforce and get more people to be willing to do it.
Well, and to that point, Shonda says we all want more money, but I feel like this is just feeding inflation. It's not getting better either way. What's the fix? Great question. I mean, if you're barely making ends meet in this position, what is the fix? I mean, do you find another job, another profession?
Marguerite says nursing home workers are overworked and underpaid. Kelsey was a CNA, was going through paramedic school, 1 aide to 24 residents at a time, not safe at all. 1 aide to 24 people?
Shirley says it all, right? Wow, that's too many.
I mean, how do you manage that? It would take you, well over an hour, probably several hours to attend to everyone.
And to that point, Cindy says, my husband is in a nursing facility. They are shorthanded. So let's dig into that a little bit more, Cindy. Can you give us a little bit more information? What is your concern this morning? Knowing A, that these workers are on strike, but B, that they are trying to bring all of these issues to light. What do you make of this as somebody who has a loved one in one of these facilities? And and Cindy, I just want to be clear, is it one of these facilities? Is it a different one that's not on strike, or is it one of these that are on strike?
Because we did get the strike notice last week from the union, and since then there have been several of these facilities that have been able to come to terms and tentative deals with some of these workers, some of these unionized workers. So the ones that are striking today are kind of the ones that are left over that just have not been able to have successful negotiations yet.
The Schofield one had, I think that's in Tonawanda, they had a deal reached overnight. Kim says they work hard at their positions. I think they need more money. And I was actually going to bring this up, Elizabeth, and I'm glad that you did. Every aspect of healthcare is overworked, underpaid, and never fully staffed, from nursing homes to the support services. I mean, we're even talking in hospitals. Some of the nurses there have said in years past, especially around contract negotiations, that they are so severely understaffed. Our signal just dropping out here, so we can come back in. So severely understaffed that it puts patients at risk, and they don't feel that it is safe for all of these nurses to be caring for all of these patients, or so few of these nurses to be caring for all of these patients.
And I think caregivers are obviously so important, because think of how many people are impacted by that. We all know someone who knows someone who lives in a nursing home or who is recovering from surgery. I remember my Nana got her knee replacements a little bit ago, and she stayed in a center like this. And you're in there and you're like, okay, there are a lot of people in here. There are a lot of people that need around the clock care. They need their medication. They need their food. They need to be taken care of. Right.
Lori, to that point, when I was recently in the hospital, there was one CNA per wing. They're very short-staffed and underpaid. So I want to give you a look at where all of these strikes are happening this morning. There are a number of different facilities in Niagara County, in Erie County, that are on strike as of 6 o'clock this morning and will continue to be on strike for the next week or so. Absolute Care in Gasport, Elderwood and Lockport, Elderwood and Williamsville, Garden Gate Manor in Cheektowaga, and Northgate Manor. All of these places are on strike. They are in the streets with their signs, picketing and rallying to draw attention to what they say is bad faith union negotiations and
unfair labor practices.
Exactly.
Linda says, I feel they should get a pay increase, but that also means the cost for those people in there will go up. And you're right, something's got to give, right? If they get more money, what then goes up? Or, is someone taking a pay cut? How does this happen? And how are they able to negotiate this in a way where, we can get to everyone to be happy?
Shirley says, I was in a rehab facility for 3.5 weeks recently. She says the CNAs work so hard. Lori, poor patient had bed sores. It was horrible. And Kim is right. These people are the backbones of these homes. But look, also consider that these are for-profit homes. Like, this is a business. This is, sure, on one hand, it is a place for you to recover or a home to be in if you've reached a certain point in your life. But these businesses are also in it to make money. It's not like it's a not-for-profit facility.
It's got to come from somewhere, I guess, so they can keep the lights on. Felice says the cost for care won't go up. They bill Medicare.
Wow. Yeah. We need local owners, Felice says, and not out-of-town owners who don't care about our amazing Buffalo employees. Lori says the healthcare system has gone downhill. Marguerite, my dad wasn't progressing in rehab, so they tried to make him a resident. Hell no, she says. Took him home with wonderful caretakers during the day. Noreen would never want to be put in a nursing home.
I wonder does anybody know whose face that is on the signs that they're holding?
I bet it's the CEO. I wouldn't be surprised. Cindy says, with fewer workers, both ends get the short end. He's at Memorial Hospital Nursing Home in Niagara Falls. I feel for all of them. So he's not at one of these facilities where they're striking right now. But I wonder if there is someone who's watching here. We'd love to share your voice. We hear Cindy's concern. Obviously, she's got a loved one who's in a nursing home, in a facility that's not associated with these strikes. But if there is somebody who has a patient or a loved one in one of the facilities where they're on strike. What is the concern? What have you seen on the inside? We'd love to share your voice.
And I do imagine what it's like for the patients right now. Obviously, these workers have had enough, and they're going on strike. They're having their voices heard. But what does it look like currently inside for the patients that are there at any of these striking facilities, or even in the ones that have reached agreements and they've gotten a tentative deal? What is the reality for patients right now?
And okay, so Felice says they'll call a staffing agency and pay them even more than the regular employees. It's ridiculous. So it's not like that these patients are not being seen or cared for,
right?
But they perhaps are being paid a higher rate than what the people who actually work there are. And that's hopefully an answer to that question, Megan, because we were wondering the same thing this morning. Elizabeth says you also have admin managers who are making excessive salaries while support staff and CNAs are making slightly more than fast food workers. And you go to school to, get that kind of education.
Oh, you work for years to get there, and then it's that overworked, underpaid, and it's such hard work. And you can't cut corners with healthcare. You can't cut corners with caregiving at all, right? These are people that they're caring for day in and day out, and, working overtime, extra hours. I mean, it's very clear that they've had enough.
We've all heard the horror stories also. I wonder, is there anyone who's had, a really positive experience? Is there somebody, possible, yeah. Right? I would love to hear that as well. It should not be a money-making business, Noreen says. Always money, so wrong. Barbara says, my heart goes out to the employees, the residents, and their loved ones. We need a resolution soon.
Felice says, I made excellent money, but I couldn't see the neglect anymore. I had to leave. So it was more of a personal thing for her.
A crusade. Mm-hmm. Diane, Newfane, not striking. They are holding out another week, hoping for a different outcome. But she said that it was kind of gross up in Newfane as well. Kim says, I do know when they are on strike and have to do 28 hours of striking. So they're on strike until next Tuesday. So they're going to be out there 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Again, trying to draw attention and raise awareness about what's actually happening on the inside and calling for better conditions for them as staffers, all to take care of your loved ones. Excuse me for a second. There's a bug on the microphone and... Okay, now it's gone. Dead.
Gosh.
So, anyway.
We got it.
We'll be watching that for you throughout the day, and, we'll bring you updates about that strike, because what we've seen over the last couple of days is that as soon as some of these facilities are ready to strike,
there's a deal.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened at Schofield overnight. So anything could happen in reality, and we'll wait and see what the outcome is here in North Tonawanda. We understand that there's a media availability coming up at 9 o'clock, so we're going to send our photographer, D.L. Webster, up to get that information for us and kind of find out where they stand in terms of getting a deal done.
Thank you, Felice, for the safe travels. Speaking of which, should we talk about air travel and how that's all going? We were talking about this morning, and it really sparked an interesting conversation about how much the process of traveling by plane has changed. And there are so many more fears now because of close calls or actual incidents that have happened at airports. So how do you feel about traveling, about flying? Do you have any more worries or any added stresses because of those close calls that we've been seeing? Most recently, one that's raising a lot of eyebrows here is a flight that was bound for Buffalo coming from New York City, but there was a close call on the runway.
So the pilot of that American flight that was coming to Buffalo from LaGuardia was stopped dead in his tracks out of concern that they could possibly crash with a United flight that was coming in for a landing. And, you hear the audio where the air traffic controller's like, stop, basically, with urgency in his voice. And I want to play that for you. Listen to what it sounded like.
36, stop. American 4736, sorry about that. I thought United had cleared well before that. Just stay there for a moment, and I got to get the other United out of the way. We'll get you off the runway.
Okay, so that was like the after, but the before was a little unnerving if you're listening to it.
I mean, imagine, obviously you're on the plane, so hopefully, the people who were traveling don't really know about this going on.
Can we play this part?
American 4736, stop. American 4736, sorry about that. I thought United had cleared well before that. Just stay there for a moment, and I got to get the other United out of the way. We'll get you off the runway.
Okay, so that's the audio you heard, but he goes,
You
Brickyard
couldn't-
47, stop!
So this was a flight coming from Oklahoma City, went to LaGuardia, and then was on its way to Buffalo. At LaGuardia Airport is where this happened. So it's one of those close calls. And I think it just is a little unsettling for people when we hear about things like this. Shonda makes a great point. I work in the aerospace industry. You are safer in the air than you are in a car.
Yes.
And bottom line here, it is safe to fly. You should feel safe going to and from. But I do think that, maybe it's just in the back of your mind at this point. You're taking off or you're landing and you're like, I hope I'm not one of those close calls.
Well, and I said it this morning, two things. Number one, we think of flying a little bit differently here in Western New York, especially what happened after 3407 many, many years ago in 2009. And then two, is this happening more or are we just hearing about it more?
Right?
So I honestly, I wonder which is which here, because this could have been happening for many years and we just weren't hearing
Now
about
we're just
it.
hyper aware.
Exactly. Though I love flying. I think it's the greatest thing in the
It's
entire
magical.
world. I think it's the most amazing feat of technology, where you can literally fly in this little tube and just all of a sudden be in from between like Buffalo and Fort Lauderdale in 3 hours. Like that is insane to me.
The best thing is being able to sleep on a flight.
Yes.
It's like time travel. You go to sleep one place, you wake up somewhere else, get right off the plane. I mean, it's incredible.
Okay, so Megan, again, hopefully you're able to answer that question. I mean, we're all wondering the same thing here. Marguerite, Felice, maybe I'll take a ship back to Sicily. There you go. My feet on the ground, regardless of statistics. Barbara says, I still feel it's safe to fly over 40 years in aviation. So there you go. Felice, though, says it is happening more. Wonder. Connie, I think you hear about it more also. There's more planes in the air, however. Have you ever looked at FlightAware? Yeah, love watching all those planes. I think it's super cool. Again, like aviation to me is really interesting. And just the way it's done. My mom just came back from Asia.
Right.
No second thoughts about flying recently. It was crazy long, but great.
Yeah, Sarah says she's very nervous. Flying in less than 2 weeks to Jamaica. Tried to get my husband to book us separate flights since the kids aren't coming with us.
Well, I understand your concern and, certainly empathize with that. But, wouldn't you like to be together?
It'll be okay.
Yeah.
You have to just you have to have faith. I mean, the pilots and, the crews, like the people who are working very hard to make sure that these things don't happen.
Well, and consider all of the increases in safety that have come into play here since the crash of Flight 3407.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about people who are much more qualified now to fly planes than they were prior to that crash in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
You have the ability, the responsibility, frankly, as a passenger to ask, who's flying my plane? There are, databases and training exercises and hour thresholds that you have to pass to be a pilot nowadays. But certainly there need to be changes, it appears, to the air traffic control system nationwide.
Yeah, and I'm flying into Newark too, and that's been the hub of all of the issues right now. Everyone who's flying in and out has said, "Oof, the Newark airport has been rough." But I think who said they fly early? Yeah, Connie says I go early. Fewer problems there, and I think that's
Lori
ideal.
says too.
It's the planning ahead aspect of it, and just the peace of mind. There's nothing you can do. It will be okay. So many flights go up and down every single day, and we never hear about them, and they're just fine. But I do understand the reality of it gets a little bumpy or something happens, and there's a little bit of a delay, and you're like, hold on.
Mark kind of echoing my point, it's not the flight crews, it's the control system, right? So, obviously those changes need to go into effect at the air traffic control towers across the country. But I'm saying, that there have been safety changes to, increase safety.
Yeah, since 3407.
Exactly. Speaking of changes being made for safety, how about this in the correctional facilities? And Anita, this is one that I think you'll be interested in hearing. I had, during those Wildcat strikes, we were all talking about how staffing levels were impacted in state facilities across the state. We're talking, locally about 5 or 6 different prisons here that had all of these workers on strike, all of these corrections officers on strike. And what so many of you told us is that there were high levels of resignation as a result of these strikes, in addition to the terminations that had happened as a result of these strikes. So I went looking for the numbers, and what I found out is that there were 535 resignations between February and April.
Wow.
And 17% of those resignations came from Western New York.
I mean, that's that immediate impact, right? And that's such a small period of time to have so many people come off the job, obviously, during this big strike that happened. So then, what happens? How do you run things day to day if you have 500 fewer people working?
And so that's what the commissioner of the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision is saying. He just testified last Wednesday, a week ago tomorrow, in front of a state committee, and said that they are now working to make sure that they can address these staffing levels and, how adequate staffing is necessary for safe facilities. Felice, don't get me started on the CO situation. It hits too close to home. My nephews are there. Mark, wondering if the National Guard is still in these prisons, and I don't think they are. I think they've been slowly but surely phased
Making their way out. And there've been discussion too about closing prisons as well. I mean, I can imagine that, in the next 2 to 3 years, the entire prison system in the state looks different following this. I mean, those were really bombshell wildcat strikes that happened, and there were so many things that we learned through those, and this new information just opens your eyes even more to the reality of what's going on here and the future, of what's going to happen.
Oh, so we're getting conflicting stories. First, I just want to address Anita's comment here. The amount of resignations isn't over yet. Those that stayed are still getting hammered. So Anita is saying that she's expecting more resignations on top of the 535 that have already resigned in that one small little window of time.
Wow.
Though Anita says the National Guard is still there, while Felice is saying no National Guard, they're all gone. So maybe it varies prison by prison.
Yeah.
Maybe in Western New York, they're all gone. They've drawn down, but in prisons elsewhere in New York, they're still in place.
Oh, that's the reality, though, is that it's still there's still issues. There are still things that need to be taken care of, right? The strike is over, but the fallout continues.
So I actually found out that the Department of Corrections is now hiring a third-party vendor to try and attract and bring in more staffers. And that effort is supposed to start this month.
How do you do that?
I don't know.
How do you attract people to work in these prisons?
Megan
what do you
says,
tell them?
Some are out on disability. Maybe when they have to go back, they'll resign. Great question. Shonda says, as they should. People are still leaving New York, and I'm here for it. Marguerite saying the National Guard members that were sent in must be feeling relief.
If they're not still there.
Well, and consider how young some of those National Guard members were, right? As they try and now reduce the age of a corrections officer to 18. So many of them were obviously unqualified to be in there. Anita says, I retired in 2017, but my neighbor is a sergeant at Wendy and says the National Guard is still there. Okay, interesting. Though Felice says the Department of Corrections needs to open more prisons and pay the COs more. What do we think about that? I mean, opening more prisons, they're talking about closing some.
Right. And then are they going to be able to pay them more? Will they pay them more? I don't know.
Some 18-year-olds can't even count change, Felice says.
Oh, goodness.
Anita says there's an 18-year-old National Guard working in these maximum security jails. And, that's difficult, right?
That's scary. I mean, scary to think about.
Here's what Ryan says. Ryan, good morning to you. Glad you're with us for Second Cup and hope that we can connect you with voices from our community now that you've moved away. He says, I was born in Western New York and moved away in 2007, and seeing all the struggle back home hurts. Shirley says it's not good when prisoners have more rights than the guards. And that's what they were really complaining about. That was the big, one of the biggest things on top of safety. Pay, wasn't necessarily a huge factor, but certainly when they're overworked and short-staffed, it becomes a problem.
Right, and then it starts to get personal, and you're like, okay, do they care about me? I go to work every day. I'm working all these hours. I don't feel I'm being paid enough. Why do I do this?
Mark says it was a time that the state wasn't taking prisoners from the counties. Yes, that's true. Though that has seemingly resolved itself.
They've been able to clear out those jails.
Yeah, hearing from the Erie County Sheriff, John Garcia in particular, who was talking about having to house some of these state prisoners who are ready for transfer, and how it's having a major impact financially on the county taxpayers. And should the county be paying for this? The answer is probably no if it's supposed to be in state custody. Nonetheless, it's your tax dollars at work here.
Anita says the system is so broken, more or less prisons is a Band-Aid on an arterial bleed.
Interesting.
Peter asked the question, if prisons are going to allow 18-year-olds to be corrections officers, where will they get the training? Would high schools then have to start teaching criminal justice or have the police academy there?
A good point.
That's another great question because, you come out of geometry and then all of a sudden,
you're taking Regents exams.
Right, you're taking Regents and then all of a sudden you're out here, you're in prisons, doing one of the toughest jobs you can do.
Noreen, so nothing was resolved from the issues that were brought to our attention. Let's use the state money to... But votes. I'm not really sure what you're trying to say, Noreen, and maybe you could just rephrase that for me. Tennessee Bob, good morning to you on Twitter. Los Angeles, listening, born at Niagara Falls Memorial. Glad you're with us. Hopefully we could connect you with voices back in Western New York as well and bring you back home a little bit.
Yeah.
This is an issue that is not going to go away either. No. And, while the strike is over and certainly we've drawn back our resources a little bit on covering this, we are still keeping it front and center
on top of it and having those conversations behind the scenes, and covering it and making sure that we're here for the fallout, right, and we continue to show some of that impact. Because there was a point we were talking about it every day.
Right.
It doesn't mean we're not still talking about it every day here, but it is interesting when you talk about the overall impact and what we're going to see down the line.
All right, let's leave you on a positive note this morning. You covered this really cool story yesterday about a Bills movie.
Well, when you go to Highmark Stadium, it's always exciting, right? But you expect to talk about football. It's always fun to see the new Highmark Stadium being built across the street. But I was not there on football business. We were there on movie making business.
Give us the info.
We're talking about it's called Holiday Touchdown, a Bills love story. The Chiefs tried to do their Hallmark movie, but the Bills are going to do it better this year. And it's going to be filming here in Western New York for the next 3 to 4 weeks. There it is, Holiday Touchdown. And what's really cool is we now know who's in the movie. So this is the Hallmark Channel's video. That's Matthew Daddario. That was Holland Roden.
Who the hell are they?
Okay, so you might know Holland Roden from, she was on Teen Wolf. So that was very important to me in high school. And then I don't know what Matthew Daddario is from, if I'm being completely honest. But he looks good. I'm happy to see him in the movie.
He does look good.
A couple of other people you might know. Steve Shrippa, I think his name is. He's from The Sopranos. I think Michael J. Fox's wife is in it. Who else is in it? A couple of good actors and actresses. But then, Johnny, if you can pause this once we get to this part. These are the people, obviously, that you'll know. Okay, Sean McDermott is in there. Damar Hamlin, Dawson Knox, Ray Davis, Deion Dawkins, Reed Ferguson, Dwayne Carter, Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer, our newest player, right? New wide receiver, able to make it in the movie, so we love that. And then some of our legends, the Bills alumni, Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Steve Tasker, Scott Norwood, Andre Reed.
Okay, I gotta be honest. I'm thrilled that they're bringing Norwood into this. I mean, he's the wide right guy. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of trauma. You think there's going to be a wide right part in the movie?
There has got to be. I mean, how does he get away with that unscathed?
I know. That's so tough. Peter's right. Tony Danza is in it, who's the boss, which is really cool. Danielle says, are they normal Hallmark actors? I got to say, I'm not a Hallmark expert. Isn't Jeff Baker? He's super into Hallmark.
Yeah, right. Cracking apples in his man hands in Hallmark movies.
Yeah, you can tell us who's in there. But I don't know. I'm not a big Hallmark person, but I will be when this movie comes out. But we're now learning the plot as well, like what the movie's actually about. So the woman, Holland Roden, is a pediatric doctor, so we're probably going to see O'Shea in the movie.
Okay.
And her lifelong friend, who now works for the Bills, they were, childhood friends growing up, and they never sensed anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Then they all of a sudden they were vanished and separated from each other.
Right. Connie hopes Josh has a cameo. He's not listed in it, but come on, right? We want to see QB1. So basically, she wants to do something nice for her uncle for Christmas, and they want to make sure it's Bills related. So they're trying to do all this hunting to make sure that he has the best Christmas ever. And then at the end of the day, the guy ends up pulling some strings with the Bills, and then they fall in love along the way, and it'll be cute.
After. there.
But what I learned yesterday is that it's going to be really, really Buffalo based. They're going to be at Buffalo restaurants. Hopefully there's some like beef on weck in there. It's going to be super representative of who we are as a city of good neighbors. And I was also told that some of the cast and crew who aren't from here are starting to get a glimpse of that. They're like, okay, we've been filming in New York, LA, Vancouver, but filming here is a little bit different. The people here are really nice.
Buffalo's a great place. We'll drop a link to that story in the comments here and a story about the corrections officers on strike and those resignation numbers also in the comments. We got to get the show on the road here. Hope you're off to a great start on this Tuesday. See ya.